Well, Israel's Prime Minister has toughened his stance this Wednesday by declaring that his country is in charge of its own security and isn't an American protectorate, as he prepared to discuss progress on Gaza's fragile ceasefire agreement with the US Vice President JD Vance. Let's get more on why Benjamin Netanyahu spoke those words. Noga Tarnopolsky is, of course, our correspondent joining us live from Jerusalem. Noga, a very good evening to you. British soldiers deployed to Israel to be part of this gathering unit at this US base, which is causing some controversy. You told us about it 24 hours ago. Give us more on why Benjamin Netanyahu has been, in a sense, forced to say what he said.
Well, both Prime Minister Netanyahu and Vice President Vance were forced to publicly address the question, almost a cartoonish question of, is Israel now a vassal state, I'm quoting, of the United States? We have, as you said, the President of the United States Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff. To the best of my knowledge, he is still in Israel. And it was a press conference that he held yesterday with Vice President Vance and the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, at this American base in the southern Israeli city of Kiryat Gat. Very little was known about this base until the American visitors held a pretty big press conference there. And all of a sudden, Israeli journalists realized that the United States is basically giving the orders. Everything that will happen in Gaza, at least from the Israeli side, is going to go through this U.S. filter or U.S. authorization. Prime Minister Netanyahu is a hard-right prime minister. He ran in the last election in 2022 on a platform of, quote, sovereignty. That was his electoral slogan. And so you can imagine that he has got through quite a bit of a whiplash, I would say today, of being asked, is Israel operating like a sovereign state? Is Israel allowed to disagree with the United States? And to what an extent is the U.S. simply running now the entire Gaza operation? In all honesty, we don't have a response, and it does appear that the U.S. is calling the shots and that the U.S. has decided this war is over, and no matter what happens, however offended Israel or Israeli ministers are, the United States is calling the shots here. So today, on more than one occasion, the Prime Minister of Israel and the American Vice President were directly asked the question, is Israel a protectorate of the United States, or can it still operate independently? And Israelis are still waiting for, I would say, a convincing answer to that, among other questions.
Noga, can I just change tack here? The International Court of Justice is ruling that Israel must allow UNRWA and others to deliver Gaza aid and can't block operations. Can you give us some insight into that, please?
Yes, I mean, the International Criminal Court has no enforcement branch, so this is not going to do much except for possibly threaten Israel's status to a certain extent at the UN. This doesn't have much bearing, but again, it is another stain against Israel in the international community. The criminal court says that Israel simply did not provide the evidence to show that a majority or a preponderance of UNRWA officials, UNRWA employees working in Gaza were connected to Hamas, which is recognized as a terrorist group. I have to just add as a journalist here that on more than one occasion, we've confronted pretty alarming claims by the Israeli army without any evidence being given. It doesn't mean that the claims are untrue. I really can't answer regarding UNRWA, but it does appear that Israel simply didn't provide, the receipts necessary.
And finally, Noga, may I ask you, Israeli lawmakers voting through a bill regarding settlements and possible annexation of the West Bank. Now, this is an extremely controversial issue and one that Trump has said that he's against.
Absolutely. What we saw today, in another reflection, I would say, like the vassal state question, in another indication of Netanyahu's weakness as a prime minister, he was trolled. In fact, he was trolled by both sides of parliament today on purpose while JD Vance is visiting. Lawmakers from the very extreme right pushed a bill that would impose, quote unquote, impose Israeli sovereignty. In other words, annex the entire of the Palestinian occupied West Bank. And lawmakers from a centrist party, headed by the head of the opposition, Yair Lapid, presented a much more modest bill also, declaring Israeli sovereignty on one city near Jerusalem, but also in the West Bank. None of these bills have any bearing on reality. They were just symbolic bills passed into committee, but it was another humiliation for the prime minister, who would actually support annexation, but simply doesn't have the political means to do it.
Noga Tarnopolsky, as always, thank you very much indeed. Noga, of course, is our correspondent in Jerusalem. Thanks again.